Lowe's knows you want to get even more value for the holiday. That's why as a My Lowe's Rewards member, you get new member deals on holiday decor, tools, and more. And you earn points when you shop. More points equal more rewards to help you save on holiday and more. Not a member? Join for free today at Lowe's.com/MyLowe'sRewards because Lowe's knows deals. Program subject to terms and conditions. Points are awarded on eligible purchases. See Lowe's.com/terms for full details. Subject to change.
You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have a right to an attorney prior to or during any question. If you can't afford one, the court will appoint one for you. Do you understand your rights?
When the wolf is at your door, your running's over, that's for sure. He already knows all about you. Cut you down, no matter by you. Now you better walk the line. Real life, real
Warning, this episode of Real Life, Real Crime, the podcast, may contain descriptions of acts of violence or that of a sexual nature and should be for people that are 18 years or older. Heed my warning, people. I do not get the facts of these cases off of the internet or from some television show. The facts I'm retelling you were presented to me by the victims of the crimes or the perpetrators who committed the crimes against the victims. My descriptions of the crime scenes, what I saw with my own two eyes. If you're going to get offended, please turn this podcast off now. Thank you. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of Real Life, Real Crime, the podcast. As always, I'm your host, Woody Overton. And today, y'all, I'm going to try and conclude the case on Courtney Coco's, or this series, if you will, on Courtney Coco's murder trial. And y'all, I have so much more that I could tell you, but I'm going to try to condense it and get it all done in this last episode. You're going to hear me turning pages. Again, I was in court. I took these notes. I can't even read my own handwriting half the time, so I'm going to paraphrase some things to condense it down for you. Okay, so we'll be done with this series, but I'm going to ask why would I keep doing this? And, you know, I'm doing it because it's important to me, and it's important that Courtney's story be told. All right. Crew Bash, February 3rd and 4th. Tickets still available. Go to eventbrite.com. I think it's under RLRC-TIP. Get your tickets. VIP is Friday night. The regular bash is Saturday night. And get your local raffle tickets. And we're going to bring y'all some episodes on that. But let's get into the story and let's try to finish it. Okay. So I left you last. Stephanie, Courtney's mama, had testified. And when she got done, Hugo Holland, the special prosecutor I've told you much about, rested his case. Okay, so the case then goes to the court. The defense has their chance to put on their witnesses. Certainly Burns could have testified. He didn't want to, naturally. But the court only calls one witness. Now, this witness is Dr. Stephen Norman. Okay, I have pages and pages and pages on this, but everything pretty much has already been discussed by the original pathologist, Dr. Brown, who done over 15,000 autopsies, testified as an expert witness over 100 times and all this stuff. Dr. Stephen Norman, Alexander PD brought him in, I think 2016, 2017, something like that, and just gave him the case file. And he read the case file, and he had the blood that's now been stored for 2004, 14 years, something like that. And he had that retested. Now, you remember Dr. Brown said there was no blood left in Courtney's body because it was so badly decomposed. And he had to use the spleen because the spleen is a bloody organ, but he actually had to squeeze the spleen to get enough blood out to test. But the test that they did was qualitative, not quantitative, meaning they could tell you what's in the system, but you can't say how much or where it came from. The point of contention being that Dr. Stephen Norman said Courtney Coco died from an accidental overdose of alcohol and tramadol and all this other bullshit. But what he did, Dr. Stephen Norman took that blood sample and he ran it like you would a normal toxicology. There's several problems with that, and I'm probably saving y'all some time because I'm going over his testimony without telling you verbatim what was said. But the problem with that is the sample would have continued to degrade over the years, and as the body degrades, you get a higher percentage of alcohol, right? It's fermenting. But let's go back to it. Dr. Stephen Norman gets on the stand, and he states that he's testified dozens of times as a pathologist, and Hugo checks him on that, right? Hugo said, well, you know what? I've only got you testifying 3 times as an expert witness. So is Dr. Norman lying? Probably, or embellishing at least. So Hugo was trying to, basically Hugo questioned, so, okay, which jurisdictions have you done all this testifying in? Dr. Norman couldn't remember. But Dr. Norman had been the coroner at some point in Rapides, and Hugo basically stuck him out and said, when was the last time you received any forensic pathology training? And Dr. Norman had to admit that it was way back in the 70s. And Hugo said, so last time you received any training on how to conduct a criminal autopsy was when Jimmy Carter was president, and he had to admit to it. Now, look, Dr. Stephen Norman, I don't know how old he is. He's probably late 60s, early 70s, something like that. He's retired now, y'all. And, obviously a very intelligent man, but my personal feelings is he's full of shit. So when Hugo ask him, so he said, do you know that Dr. Brown has testified in over 15,000 criminal pathology cases or homicides he's worked? And Dr. Brown said, I don't believe that. And Hugo was like, what do you mean you don't believe that? And he said, are you calling Dr. Brown a liar? And he's like, I don't think that's true. He said, well, so you're calling him a liar? And he said, well, I mean, I just think that's highly suspect. Hugo basically locks Dr. Norman in his entire career. He says he's done approximately, out of all the autopsies he said he did, that approximately 50 of them were all by people who died violent deaths, okay? So he says, Norman says, I think that he'd done approximately 500 autopsies, and Hugo locks him into that roughly 50 of those were by people who died a violent death. And Hugo asked him, well, if you're qualified to perform forensic autopsies, then why, when you were coroner, did you send all your autopsies to another doctor? So Hugo had him on that. Then LaCour gets up and starts to go over him with him about when he reviewed the autopsy in 2016, or made his own autopsy report in 2016, that he was brought in by the Alexandria Police Department, and he looked at reports and the autopsy on Coco. Dr. Norman stated that he offered to do this after he saw the name in the newspaper, and he said he could be available without pay to review Courtney's case. And y'all, I'm going to say, Dr. Norman cites 3 articles which contradicted Dr. Brown's. But basically what he says, and you're going to hear pages turn, basically what he says is that Courtney absolutely died of an accidental overdose, and she drank herself to death, and had tramadol, et cetera, in her system. And the LaCour asked him about testing the spleen. He said, wouldn't it have been better to test from the liver, the blood from the liver? Well, the problem with that, y'all, is if you remember, Dr. Brown testified there was no blood in the liver. The only place he could get blood from was the spleen. Everything else was gone. Her body was too badly decomposed. So LaCour was looking like a dumbass on that. It just goes on and on and on about, basically, then they're just trying to say how Dr. Brown got it wrong. Now, you remember Dr. Brown, was in his 80s, and not when the Courtney Coco's case happened, but Dr. Brown actually saw Courtney's body. Dr. Brown actually talked to the investigators that were on the scene, and a pathologist's job is to gather all the information from the detectives, then to conduct the autopsy, and then to turn around and give information from the body back to the detectives so they could help their case, right? And I'm not going to read you all this shit. It just goes, I got like 20 pages of LaCour talking to this idiot. And, but to sum it up, he's sticking by his guns that his autopsy report was right, even though Dr. Brown has already explained that he couldn't have tested the remaining samples because since medical literature, since the people began doing autopsies, it's proven that if you use that old sample, you're flirting with medical and legal disaster. So when he was asked about the gum in her stomach, which Dr. Brown said he's only seen like 3 times in all the 15,000 autopsies he did, and Dr. Brown said that's because when they choked her to death, she swallowed a gum. And Stephen Norman says, "Oh no, I don't find that significant. I don't think there's anything to that." He says that's just pure ludicrous bull. Then when LaCour says, "Well, she ate her," Dr. Brown says she ate her last meal within 2 hours of her death, and Dr. Norman says, "I don't think that's significant." Is that they talked about when Courtney's body was found at the advanced state of decomposition. It was as she had been deceased longer, but he says, Dr. Norman says, "Well, it doesn't surprise me." And he advances decomposition. So LaCour says, "Doc, in your expert opinion, do we know what caused the death of Courtney Coco?" And he said, "My opinion is alcohol and tramadol." And he said, "I completely disagree with Dr. Brown's autopsy report." Right? So Hugo gets back up and he says, "Of the autopsies you conducted, there were about 50 of violent deaths." And he said, "Are you aware Dr. Brown did over 15,000? And again, this is what I told you all a minute ago. He said, "I don't believe that." So Hugo says, "Are you suggesting Dr. Brown lied?" He said, "Well, I'm very surprised on that." And he said, "You're walking backwards now." So the 50 autopsies that you've done, you 3 times you testified in court. He said, "You're aware Dr. Brown has testified hundreds of times?" And Norman says no. He said, "Well, in your CV, you list your last formal training as in the 70s. And he said, yes. Talking about in forensic pathology, y'all. And he said, also, you've never been board certified pathologist. And Dr. Norman says, no, I've not. So he's not even in the ballpark with Dr. Brown, y'all. And on the tolerance part, Hugo, basically, I'm going to sum it up for you. Hugo said, someone uses drugs over a long period of time, don't they develop a tolerance for it? And he was like, well, they could. And he said, what about alcohol? He said, well, I don't know. And he said, well, correct me if I'm wrong. For someone who doesn't drink at all, would a blood alcohol of 0.25, would that person pass out? Dr. Norman says, yes. He said, so blood alcohol 0.25, and Dr. Norman tried to cut him off and say something else. And Hugo said, hey, I went to law school. I get to ask the questions. You don't. Now, at this point, Hugo's hammering his ass, right? And rightfully so. He said, how many of the 50 autopsies you did were on decomposed bodies? And to the point of rotten and stinking. And Dr. Norman said something like maybe 12. So then they get into all these medical terms, and they talked about the spleen. Hugo showed him the article that Dr. Brown had presented that's been used since the beginning of time, and Dr. Norman was like, I don't know about that, et cetera. So Hugo says, do you agree with Dr. Brown about the qualitative, not quantitative? And Dr. Norman says, well, this is very interesting. He said, well, do you agree with him that that's the only way it can be viewed? And he said, well, Dr. Norman says, well, I'd have to think about that. And it just goes on and on, y'all. Basically, at the end of the day, I'm going to turn some pages. I guess it's how many I have, and I'm trying to save y'all some time. Because at the end of the day, Dr. Norman is trying to defend his position, which he has no fucking position. He never saw Courtney. He had some blood tested years later. He never read. Hugo got to admit, did you ever talk to any detectives on the case? No. Did you ever read the case file on the case? He said no. Did you read the police reports on the case? He said no. He said, so basically, you just got information from APD that this girl had died. He said, well, I read the original autopsy. And he said, oh, no, listen to me. He said, basically, you just read that original autopsy and you didn't work with any law enforcement. You didn't have any other knowledge other than what you found in the original autopsy. And he had to admit that that was true. All right. So I'm going to get on past this, y'all. LaCour got back up and on the redirect to try to save Dr. Brown and just didn't do it justice. I mean, it was ridiculous.
Spark something uncommon this holiday with just the right gift from Uncommon Goods. The busy holiday season is here, and Uncommon Goods makes it less stressful with incredible hand-picked gifts for everyone on your list, all in one spot. Gifts to spark joy, wonder, delight, and that's exactly what I wanted feeling. Hey, y'all, I ordered a super cool piece. It's a candle with a sculpture of an LSU's Tiger Stadium on top of it. And each officially licensed laser cut wooden replica features up to 4 layers of detail, creating a bird's eye view of a specific football field, seating section, and more. And every label includes your stadium's name, the team's logo, and school location. And it has a coconut, soy, vegan wax infused with sandalwood smell that creates tailgates and touchdowns scent profile, reminiscent of game day. It's invigorating like fresh cut grass and nostalgic like smoke from a pre-game grill, and calming like the crisp autumn air of a new semester on campus. Y'all, I love it. I have it at the base of my TV, and I'm ready to watch the Tigers play on Saturday night, right? Uncommon Goods. Look, when you shop at Uncommon Goods, you're supporting artists and small independent businesses. And many of their handcrafted products are made in small batches. So shop now before they sell out this holiday season. Uncommon Goods looks for products that are high quality, unique, and often handmade or made in the U.S. They have the most meaningful, out of the ordinary gifts anywhere. They even have gifts you can personalize. From holiday hosts and hostess gift to the coolest finds for kids, to hits for everyone from the book lovers to diehard sports fans. Uncommon Goods has something for everyone, not the same old selections you can just find anywhere. And with every purchase you make at Uncommon Goods, they give $1 to a nonprofit partner of your choice. They've donated more than $3 million to date. So to get 15% off your next gift, go to uncommongoods.com/RLRC. That's uncommongoods.com/RLRC for 15% off. Don't miss out on this limited time offer. Uncommon Goods, we're all out of the ordinary.
Hey, y'all, let me tell you about Gobble. All Gobble meal kits are pre-prepped. That means less work for you and less waste in your kitchen. Their meal kits include everything you need so you can save time at the store or just skip that trip entirely. I got the box in and I had 3 different meals. I had a Kung Pao chicken, crispy fish tacos, and a beef bourguignon, however you say it. But let me tell you about the classic beef bourguignon. Look, it came with beef pot roast and a beef broth concentrate, red wine demi-glaze, cremini mushrooms, cipollone onions, mashed potatoes, baby carrots, and rosemary thyme butter. It was so easy to make. Literally like 15 minutes it took Cindy. And let me tell you something, and all the dishes were fire, but this thing was like a taste explosion in my mouth. It's just unreal. We got to spend more time together and more time doing the things we love because everything came in this one single box right to my door. So see what a difference Gobble will make for your household. Right now, they're offering my listeners a fantastic limited time deal. You get $120 off across 4 boxes plus free shipping and free cookies. And let me tell you, those cookies, I ate one that was sin baked and it was delicious. Go to gobble.com/real life. That's GOBBLE.com/real life for $120 off your first 4 boxes. This offer is not available on the home site, so don't miss out. This is genius. It's taste explosions in your mouth like you never had.
Hugo did get in. He said, "Did you ever talk to Courtney's family?" And he said, "No." He said, "Do you know? Talk to her friends? Do you know if she drank every day?" He said, "No." And he said, "Do you know, you know what her tolerance was to alcohol?" Blah blah blah. I mean, Hugo did a hell of a job, punched the shit out of him, and he gets off the stand. Then we go to closing arguments, y'all. Now, in closing arguments, I told you in the beginning, Hugo gets to get up and do his opening statements of the closing arguments, if you will. LaCour gets to get up and do his part, and then Hugo gets to get up and have the final say-so. So Hugo gets up, and he shows on the TV screen, moderation in pursuit of justice is no virtue. He said, "I consider myself an honest man, and I take my job serious." He said, "I'm going to sit up here so not to block y'all's view." Yeah, y'all, he's moving out of the way of the TV. He said, "Guilt shall not escape." He said, "Why I told you we wouldn't be here if I didn't believe that David Anthony Burns killed Courtney." He said, "I am extremely proud to speak for the dead because Courtney can't speak for herself." He said, "Killing of a human being, the body dumped or positioned, who were more qualified? Dr. Brown, who did over 15,000 autopsies over 50 years, is board certified, and he had the case detective with him. He says is a homicide. Now, Dr. Norman, who's a clinical pathologist, never reviewed the police report or crime scene photos. He only did 15,000. That's what he testified, 15,000 autopsies, and he's only testified 3 times. He called Dr. Brown a liar. Do you believe he lied? Now, he's talking to the jury, y'all. He said, "I told y'all I was going to challenge Mr. LaCour to prove that this wasn't a homicide. And I gave you the reasonable explanation how this can't be anything but murder." He said, "I'm throwing that challenge out again." He said, "I want LaCour to get up here and tell you that this wasn't a murder and prove to you that this wasn't a murder." And he goes on to talk about Fred Landry, y'all. He said, "Fred Landry, is he the evil genius and murderer and can get away with this? Or is the most reasonable explanation that his DNA was on the latch of the car was that he had a relationship with Courtney?" And, the cigarette butts in the car, the most reasonable explanation is that car was a crack loaner and it was recovered in Houston. And a bunch of people had access to it. So, and I want you to keep the Oculus razor theory of mine, y'all, that basically says that in lack of other knowledge, that the most reasonable explanation is the truth. And Hugo goes on. He said, we know it's a homicide. Dr. Brown said so. And he has far more experience than Dr. Stephen Norman. He said, now let's go to Wayne Durson. And y'all remember he's the one that went off on the court. And in the courtroom pointed at Burns and said, why don't you be a man and stand up and tell these people what you told me? Wayne Durson says it's a homicide. And he said, I ain't got no damn reason to lie. Now, Charlene, she said Burns told her that he strangled Courtney Coco. He said Seamus said Burns said that he killed Courtney. He said 3 people under oath swore that Burns said that he did it. Durson said Burns told him about the body being dumped in Texas. Charlene says Burns told him about dumping the body in Texas. Seamus said that Burns told him about dumping the body in Texas. Tiffany Cedar said Seamus had to go to Winnie. She had to go to Winnie, Texas to get Seamus one time. He said, Hugo says, I suggest we know Courtney's body was wrapped in a blanket, maybe plastic. Charlene says plastic. And then I put Miss Ann on the stand about how the shower curtain was missing. Well, she was wrapped up in plastic and a blanket. I don't know. I wasn't there. It says, we know her bedspread was missing. Clyde Griffin said he saw Prince driving her car. Charlene said Burns told her that Prince was involved in the murder. Burns didn't go to Winnie, Texas, back up and drop the body, and then hike back. You heard Dr. Scanlon said there's no physical evidence at the scene that it was a dump site. And Burns told Charlene there was a silver Mustang involved and Billy Earhart owned one. These things proved consistent with Seamus' statements. Now, Jude Lawson told you he remembered JW and 8 on the plate. He ultimately ends up picking him, drawing a photograph of him, and then picks him out of a photograph lineup being Burns, him being Burns. And he says he gets his dates mixed up, but he remembered he was coming from the store, and the store was closing around 10 p.m. And June says the car was not pulled in the building, and it was parked to the left, and he saw someone walking around and get into the car. And as he did, he saw the silhouette. He picked him out of the lineup under oath, knowing he might send someone to prison for the rest of their life. Jude still pointed out David Anthony Burns. Dr. Gazelle, the math doctor, y'all, said there's a less than 1% chance that Jude can guess even a partial plate by getting a glance of it at nighttime. He said, I'm going to suggest that Jude remembers events, not dates. Now, Janet Vayon, the only day she had her trailer on the truck, and the only day she was traveling that road was on Sunday, October the 3rd at night around that same time. She sees the almost wreck and remembers Jude coming to do a report. She's never wavered in her statements, y'all. Jude's dates weren't clear, but he was positive about it was David Anthony Burns driving the vehicle. Some stray issues about lacing the money. He said, I don't know. I don't have any doubt that Durson or Charlene heard what they heard. He said, I asked Stephanie, was it common knowledge that Courtney was getting money in the family? And Stephanie said yes. And guess what? Burns was part of the family. I suggest Burns did not know the annuity that was paid went away after Courtney's death. If I could prove Seamus had been there beyond a reasonable doubt, he would be up here on trial too. And Lace, if I had proof of her being involved, I'd prosecute her too. And about Miss Stephanie and him saying, LaCour saying that Courtney only dated black men, and that's because he's trying to establish and say that Courtney wouldn't have an affair with Burns because he was white. But Courtney is having an affair with Burns. And Seamus Settler said looks like about Courtney's body, looks like it been beaten to hell, is all black and blue from the waist up. So let's go back to Friday night. Lace and Burns have a fight. Burns leaves. He comes back. They have another fight. He leaves. He's gone the whole weekend. He said, I'm saying that Burns ran to Courtney. She was dressed for bed. And I can only guess the conversation. Maybe it was that Courtney said, I'm going back to Jitty. Or maybe Courtney said that she had an STD and that she gave it to him, or he gave it to her, or whatever. But Burns gets mad and squeezes the life out of her. So what does Burns think then? I mean, he said, what'd I do with her body? Burns drove there. He can't have anyone see this. See, this is where their case that it wasn't homicide falls apart. He said, why not leave her there? Why dump her body in Texas? She's going to be discovered, wraps her up, covered by a shower curtain, bed, spread, both are missing. And then Hugo showed the pictures, y'all, of the board under the mattress. And he says Burns then got to make 2 phone calls. First to Prince, probably said, hey, can I leave her car with you? And then he called Seamus to help dump her body. Dr. Brown said the smell of Courtney's body would have been rotten and would have permeated everything. Texas Rangers didn't say anything about the rotten smell in Courtney's car when they found it in Houston. Seamus shows up in a silver Mustang. Courtney gets put in the back of the Mustang, and likely there's riding that car with Prince driving. Likely her being put in the silver Mustang and not her own car, because Prince is driving that car, Courtney's car, around on Saturday, and he wouldn't have been doing that if it had stunk to high heaven. So the rape kit comes back negative, even though Burns said that Prince and him and Prince's cousin raped her or had sex with her, but nobody knew because there were condoms. But Burns is in Courtney's car. Seamus is in the Mustang. Charlene Gallman said Burns had been through Winnie, Texas many times. Seamus admitted he was on the road the day Courtney's body was found 3 times. So Setliff backs in, and both of them lift out Courtney's tiny corpse and dump her on the floor. And as a last insult, they raise her legs, spread her arms, which I would suggest to you is not unlike Jesus. Courtney was sacrificed. Setliff then has time to drive back from Houston and get his work van, and that's where the pair of panties were found in the van. And Hugo goes on to say, Burns did it. Maybe with Setliff, maybe not. And I think LaCour is about to get up here and say it's not murder. Burns robbed that woman of the opportunity to have a life. Make him pay. All right, y'all, that's Hugo's opening salvo. LaCour gets up, do his closing argument. And look, I don't have to spend a bunch of time reading this. And I'm going to paraphrase it because it just doesn't make any sense. Hugo was exactly right on what he's going to say. Basically, he says it's not murder. Dr. Stephen Norman says it's an accidental overdose. He says there's not one person can put my client at the scene. He said, except for Jude. Jude, who comes out all these years later and picks him out of a photo lineup. He said, I don't believe that. How do you pick a man out of a photo lineup when you only see his profile? He said, that doesn't work. He said, there's not one piece of physical evidence tying my client to the murder of Courtney Coco. He talks about, it could be Seamus. He said it could be Lace, that other people had motive. Talks about Detective Dryden, and he said, I lose faith in our police department. And Dryden couldn't even get the date straight. He couldn't Google it. And he says, when the cops don't get an answer they like, they just basically turn it around and make it work for them. He said, why would you be giving out brochures after the festival is closed. Again, y'all, he's trying to go back to Jude on that. He said the body wrap, that came from the family. Lace said it. And it was on the news that a body was dumped in Texas. It's not information only the killer would know. Silver Mustang, Seamus says it was red. She says it's silver. And y'all, he just goes on and on. And he goes back to Dryden and he says, this is the worst piece of police work ever. He said, to get back to it, he said Lace did it and they did it. They did it for the money. He said, Hugo challenged me. Hell, I'm going home. My client's innocent. LaCour says that she moved out and she only dated black men and she moved into an all-black neighborhood to date all blacks. And he goes on to talk about Fred Landry. He said, that's the biggest guy I've ever seen. And he said, I know this is crazy. And he said, I'm not laughing. He said, no one could put Burns at her house Friday or Saturday. He said, no testimony that he smelled like death. It says that anybody could be suspect on killing Courtney Coco. That, I mean, she could have told someone that she'd given them the STD. They could have killed her. Seamus, he says, Seamus, I don't know what's fact or fiction. His credibility is shot. I saw him on the video at the dunes, and he looks like he's creeping. So then you got Prince. I know Prince was seen driving Courtney's car, and he's in prison. We don't know how Prince got in the car. And then moves on to y'all, and he talks about the Dr. Stephen Norman saying it was an accidental overdose. You can't determine that it's a homicide. Dr. Brown is guessing that it's a homicide. He said, I think Courtney passed out, and Judy's a black man with a white woman that passed out, and he got scared, so he got rid of the body. Then the court goes on to tell the jury, he said, belief is not proof. You have to prove guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, and they have not done that. So y'all going to have to go back and make your own decisions. And this case is filled with holes, basically, is what he's saying, beyond a reasonable doubt. So Hugo goes through like 12 steps and disproves everything LaCour just got up and said. And at the end of it, he said, I challenged LaCour to get up here and explain that this was not a homicide. He failed. Burns confessed. Jude Wilson ID'd him. He said, I've given you everything. Go back to that jury room and come back with a guilty verdict. And he said, now the judge is going to give you some instructions. And y'all, what happened after that, the judge gives charges the jury is what they call it. And she defines what the charge is, second-degree murder, what has to have specific intent, and goes on evidence and tells them, just gives them all the instructions. So it's a long, boring list of shit. And so the jury goes out. All right. Now, we are sitting in the courtroom and we have to stand up, all rise. The jury goes out. It's late in the evening, y'all. It's like, I don't know, 5 o'clock or something. I'd have to go back and look at it because it's been some months now. And they go out, and all of a sudden it's like, holy shit, it's really over, right? But it's not, because the jury's deliberating. And I knew that they were coming back with a guilty verdict, but you can never be totally sure. And this case was 18 years almost to the day, 18 years and a month. The jury got charged. They go out. We go downstairs. I go downstairs in my truck. I call my wife and hanging out and waiting. I go back over to the courthouse, and I go back up to the fourth floor, and I sit on the side, and I could hear people talking in the hallway, family members and all that. And, it's right at getting dark. And all of a sudden they say, the judge is calling everybody back in. The judge is calling everybody back in. And I'm like, that's no big deal, y'all. I heard Miss Stephanie say, where's Woody? And so I went around the corner. I said, hey, I'm right here. I said, listen, this is probably the jury coming back out with a question or something. Y'all, had only been like an hour and 5 minutes. And I said, this is probably the jury coming back with some questions that they need cleared up or whatever. I said, there's no way this jury's coming back this fast. Now, generally, the rule of thumb is the longer the jury is out, the worse it is for the prosecution. The quicker they come back, the better it is for the prosecution, right? And my fastest case I ever had was on double clutch for 4 aggravated rapes. And the jury, it took them longer to pick a jury foreman than it did to convict him for the vote. The vote came back they were back in like 30 minutes. So I'm truly thinking that this is just going to be a question. So we file back in the courtroom, and I sit down beside Miss Stephanie on the front row, and shit, the judge comes in. And we have to stand for her, and then she sits down and she said, okay, we have a verdict in this case. So I'm like, what the fuck? And now we're all holding hands and stuff, and I'm like, I can't believe they have a verdict, and it's this fast. And so they bring the jury back in. We had to rise for them and sit down, and then judge says, I understand, jury foreman, that y'all have reached a verdict. And they said, yes. And he said, you can hand the verdict. And the bailiff took the verdict, and she read it, gave it to the judge. The judge read it, and the judge gave it to the clerk and said, Madam Clerk, will you read the verdict? Now,
Hey, ladies, are you feeling overwhelmed by hormonal changes? Well, you're definitely not alone. There are more than 1,000 hormone disruptors living in our environment right now. It's in your food, your water, the air you breathe, the clothes you wear, your skincare products. They all mess with your hormones. Then there's the natural hormone changes your body goes through, premenopause, menopause. And while it's a natural process, it doesn't mean you have to suffer through it. The good news is you don't have to suffer through it anymore, because now you have Hormone Harmony, a formula made only with herbal ingredients that are shown to reduce hormonal symptoms in women of all ages. Hormone Harmony is not just a hormone support and supplement. It's become a phenomenon. Women can't stop talking about it on social media. A bottle of Hormone Harmony is sold every 24 seconds. And the biggest benefit? Well, my wife says it makes her feel like her own self again. And that's what women mention over and over in the reviews. And there are over 30,000 reviews for Hormone Harmony. And for a limited time, you can get 15% off your entire first order at happymammoth.com. Just use code RLRC at checkout. That's happymammoth.com and use code RLRC for 15% off today. That's happymammoth.com and use code RLRC.
This point, everybody's just been over praying, crying, but it's quiet, it's silent. And I'm looking diagonally across at Burns, and the clerk reads, I'm going to paraphrase this, y'all. And the clerk reads, on the charge of second-degree murder, the state of Louisiana versus David Anthony Burns, we, the jury, find the defendant guilty on the murder of Courtney Coco. Y'all, I'm watching Burns, and it looked like somebody kicked him in the nuts. And he just, he bent over, and did like that. And then he straightens back up. And of course, the courtrooms, the families all crying and going on. And then, it's just, I'm fucking in disbelief. Not in disbelief because I knew it was going to happen. But, I mean, this is a long time. I know it's been a long story, but I don't know. I'll never forget it as long as I live. And the judge, they poll the jury, which means they ask each juror independently, is this your verdict? Is guilty your verdict? And all 12 said, yes, he's guilty. Now, independent of each other. Is this your verdict? Yes, guilty is my verdict. Yes, guilty is my verdict. Yes, guilty. It's 12 times, y'all. And then she thanks the jury and dismisses them and sets the sentencing for, a month away or whatever it was. And of course, LaCour, before she even does that, he's throwing in, I want an appeal, and this is a blah, 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 blah. And he's acting like he's all butthurt. He got his ass whipped. David Anthony Burns, fuck you. You murdered Courtney Coco, and you're going to die in Angola. Then it came time, y'all, at the end after all the course bullshit ejections, including what she said, there's no evidence in this, Your Honor, blah, 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 blah. And the judge goes to pick a sentencing date. And she gave him a bunch of dates in November. And the first one she said, I think, was November the 20th. And when she said that, Stephanie, we were holding hands. They're still all crying and stuff. But Stephanie says, that's his birthday. That's his birthday. And the court says, Your Honor, I'd ask that you pick any other date but that date because that's my client's birthday. So she moved it back like another week, right? And we came back for the sentencing, and I think it was the end of November. We go in, we expect to have the sentencing that day, and LaCour comes late to court as usual. And then he walks up to the judge, not on the record, but he says, Your Honor, I want to move the sentencing to another date. She said, no way. She said, it's happening today. He said, well, then I need a 10-minute recess. And she's like, okay, take however much time you need, right? Once again, we're all fucking waiting on LaCour. What LaCour does is goes downstairs and files 2 motions. Bullshit motions, same things he's already, I think, one to dismiss the verdict and one for whatever the fuck else. I don't even remember. It's stupid. But in doing so, he knew we had a packed courtroom. All the lifers were there. The family members were there. I'm talking about lifers drove in from all over, right? They're standing room on. You can't even stand. There are people standing all along the walls. Everything was jam-packed. And the court files those fucking motions. And he knew what he was doing. The judge said, oh, I'll hear your motions. But she was pissed. I knew what was coming. So he went through his motions about all this, and this should be dismissed and overturned, blah, blah, whatever. Judge denied both of the motions. But the court knew what he was doing. He's saying fuck you to everybody in that room because they were all there to hear the victim's impact statements and to hear the sentencing that day. Well, because he filed those last-minute motions after he got to the courthouse, and by Louisiana law, the judge could not sentence Burns for 24 hours. Now, the court knows the judge has got a full docket. And like the next day she had a trial starting and all that. And he's thinking he's going to get it pushed back for however long. And the judge was pissed, right? And she leaves and she comes back in and she's like, you know what? I'm going to set sentencing for tomorrow at 1 p.m. This is like 9:30, 10 o'clock, y'all. She said, therefore, and of course everybody's pissed, but I knew it was coming. And she said, therefore, it would have been more than 24 hours since I denied the defense's motions, and under Louisiana law, that if they file a motion, I cannot rule upon a motion and sentence the defendant in the same 24-hour period. She said, but I'll sentence him tomorrow at 1 p.m. And she said, and furthermore, I'm going to proceed and listen to all the victims' impact statements today because everybody's here, and I don't want everybody to have to come back. And so that really pissed LaCour off. But she did it. And y'all, I'm going to put it up for Patreon convicts or whatever, and it won't be this week. And it is. I had Shane McBride in from Wisconsin, McLaur Whitetail Adventures. He was kind of watching my back because of the shit they pulled back in October. And he was sitting in the back courtroom. And he said, I have never heard any shit like that in my life. Now, all the family members got to get up and give their statements to Burns. And they were strong. They were powerful. It was just, you could hear a pin drop. Everybody's crying. And the last one was Miss Stephanie. And she laid into him after 18 years of waiting. But anyway, I'll put that up for y'all. And I was thinking, oh shit, I know Burns is going to get his chance, but is he so stupid enough to get up and give a statement? And guess what? He did. He had to have the last word. But jokes on him because he spent Christmas in Angola. And what's the next holiday? Oh, guess what? David Anthony Burns, you're not going to Mardi Gras this year, bitch. They don't have Mardi Gras in Angola. And then it'll be Easter. Well, you might get a piece of ham, Burns, on Easter. I doubt it. You ain't getting any Easter eggs and whatever. You're not going to crawfish bowls this year, homie, and you never will again. You Murdered Courtney Coco. Lifers, I want to thank all of y'all for sticking with me through this. The next episode you get will be Woody Overton, old school, real life, real crime. But this story means the world to me. Courtney Coco's life story needed to be told. This piece of shit that murdered her, found guilty by a jury of his peers, not Woody Overton, although I know he did it. He's going to die in prison, and he should. I actually think he should get choked out like Courtney did. But, you know, Angola is pretty good too for him. So next time it'll be old cop stories again. And I know this was long, and I condensed this last one, and then we had the holidays, and we swapped out some episodes of Bloody Angola because of, it was holidays. And we had to take time off and be with our families. But the y'all Real Life, Real Crime Daily drops on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. It's a huge success, higher numbers than we've ever seen. But that's just us talking about, me and Mike and Jim talking about the current news stories, everything from the Idaho killer to show business. And you got to listen to that one. The female that cut the guy's head off and left it in a mop bucket. But Real Life, Real Crime, the original Real Life, Real Crime will start dropping again a week from the day that you're hearing this. A week from, it'll be drop on Tuesdays. Okay. And then of course we have Bloody Angola. We're doing 3 Bloody Angola drops a week now also. So that's 7 shows you get a week between Real Life, Real Crime Daily, Real Life, Real Crime, and Bloody Angola. And y'all please keep liking and sharing, subscribing, and doing all that good podcaster shit. Real Life, Real Crime Crew Bash tickets are on sale. Now, we sold out 2 nights for Bloody Angola. You've got to get your tickets for the Crew Bash. Friday night, VIP event, approximately 200 people. It's going to be very intimate. I'm going to sign the autographs and take pictures, and we're going to party. And we have a bunch of stuff we're going to auction off for only the VIPs out of there, items that have been donated. And hey, if you want to donate something, whatever it is, just contact us, especially for the Friday night auction. All right. And then all proceeds go to LOPA, y'all, Louisiana Organ Procurement Agency. Saturday night, of course, I'm going to take the stage, and it's going to be, I think I'm going to go ahead and tell you the name of it. The name of my show is going to be Sex, Drugs, and Murder. Chew on that one for a minute. When I get done, Chase Tyler and the Chase Tyler Band, Chase Tyler, a 2-time Louisiana Hall of Fame inductee, is going to play. And if you've been before, you know he rocks the house. And Chase and his beautiful bride, Miss Lindsay, are also going to be at the Friday night VIP event. And guess what? He's coming as a fan on the VIP event. And he, I'm honored by that. So yeah, Chase will be there, and we'll have a lot of other people there that you probably want to meet. So get your tickets, eventbrite.com. I think it's RLRC-4, but you can just look up Real Life, Real Crime and get your tickets while they last. We're only like 2 weeks away. Yeah, I think it's 2 weeks from tonight. I think it's 2 weeks. So get it, get your tickets. You got to get them once they're sold out. I can't fudge on them, y'all. It's a fire marshal issue. Okay. All right. That's it. I'm sure I'm forgetting some stuff, but Patreon members, convict members, thank you so much for subscribing. You'll never know what it means to us. It means to me and to the show and to my family. And all this stuff costs a lot of money, y'all, to do. So your support is invaluable. If we owe you something, send us a message. If you're having a problem with something, send us a message, and we'll get right on it as soon as we see it. Okay. And LOPA, Louisiana Organ Procurement Agency, you'll be hearing a commercial about the raffle we're doing this year, like we've done the last several years, to raise money for this nonprofit. LOPA saves lives, y'all. And if you're a lifer from Taiwan and you want to become an organ donor, you don't have to be from Louisiana. You can go to lopa.org, fill out the little 2-minute thing, and be a hero. Chances of your organs ever being harvested are slim to none. But if they want my shit, they can have it. And LOPA saves lives. And I'm Woody Overton, your host of Real Life, Real Crime, the podcast. Until next time or ever, don't let me catch you down on Murder Bayou. Peace. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have a right to an attorney prior to or during any question. If you can't afford one, the court will appoint one for you. Do you understand your rights?
When the wolf is at your door, you running's over, that's for sure. He already knows all about you. Cut you down no matter by you. Now you better walk the line. Real life, real O'Reilly.
You've got questions? O'Reilly Auto Parts has answers. Need a pro you can trust? We've got that too. No matter what you need, our professional parts people have the training and expertise to help you do things right. Deep automotive knowledge. Just one part that makes O'Reilly stand apart. The professional parts people.
O'Reilly.